So we have a really unique mission for you today.
Yeah, a really unique one.
We're doing a deep dive into, well, a very complex and highly specific worldview of a pretty prominent American figure.
And it's all based on one source. A single, really extensive recent interview.
Right. So we're not just talking about politics here. This is an attempt to connect his personal spiritual discipline to these massive cultural, even geopolitical judgments he's making.
That's right. And our source, just so you know, is the transcript of Bryce Crawford interviews Tucker Carlson. It's a conversation that really goes everywhere.
It does, from a super personal, like his soul and his marriage of 41 years.
All the way to these really dramatic claims about national security, technology, faith, I mean, all of it.
So our goal here is to give you a kind of structured map of this perspective. We're going to follow his logic.
Right, how he gets from A to B. We start with his evolution towards faith.
Which then defines what he sees as a threat to society.
And that, in turn, informs all these very practical and often very provocative critiques of modern life, both in private and in public.
It's a fascinating argument because he basically says that a man's internal integrity, his fight against his own self-righteousness, has to come first.
Yeah, it's the foundation. You have to do that before you can even begin to talk about what's wrong with the culture. So let's just jump right into that foundational shift.
The spiritual pivot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The moment he frames as this literal realization of, well, evil in the world.
Okay, so this first section is absolutely critical. It sets the frame for everything.
He does.
He was raised a Christian, baptized, establishment Protestant, even married a minister's daughter, so he was always sort of around the faith.
But he makes this really clear point that it wasn't fully present for him, not in his daily life.
Not until about 4 years ago. So the question is, what happened? What was the catalyst?
The way he tells it, the world just sort of stopped making sense.
Right, under his old framework.
Exactly. The old, purely rational political framework he'd been using for decades. He saw everything as just. Groups fighting over power or resources.
A standard political view.
A standard political view. But then around 4 years ago, he started seeing things that, to him, just defied that logic. He saw people, quote, destroying things for the sake of destroying them.
And he gives a very specific example to illustrate this, the Black Lives Matter movement.
He does. And from his viewpoint, his observation of it, he concluded it, quote, had nothing to do with helping anybody.
He says, look, if the goal had been something like reparations, that would have at least made a kind of sense to him.
Right. A political bargain. It's transactional.
But what he saw instead was, and this is his description, an orgy of violence and fire and murder. And to him, that just made no sense.
And that lack of a rational motive.
Yeah.
That was the moment for him. The idea that people would destroy just for the sake of it. It forced him to look for a metaphysical reason.
A non-political reason.
Exactly. And his conclusion, which he says informs everything now, is that this is a manifestation of evil. Something that destroys for the sake of destruction.
So that's the pivot. If he can see this kind of pure, unmotivated evil at work.
Then the reverse must also be true. Then clearly God is at work too. And that philosophical shift had immediate practical consequences for him.
Right. He commits to reading the Bible by himself, cover to cover.
Genesis to Revelation. Took him a year. Now he's just cycling through the New Testament. Has been for 4 years.
What's interesting, though, is his skepticism of theology.
Yeah, he's very wary of it. He says sophisticated theology is often just used to mislead people.
Or to justify political positions.
Right. He says he just wants the simple questions answered. Who is Jesus, and how do you try to emulate him?
And that leads directly into what he sees as the central struggle, which for him is not external at all, it's internal.
This is a fascinating part of the interview. He insists we're always mistaking these huge issues of worldview for just, surface-level politics.
And he says we're actually not really commanded to struggle against other people.
Which is.
Yeah.
That's a pretty unorthodox thing to hear from him, given his public persona.
It is. He says the first step, the primary struggle, is right there in the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us.
Meaning the battle is against yourself first.
Exactly. You have to remove the log in your own eye before you even think about the speck in your neighbor's.
And he gives this surprisingly candid admission about his own personal vices to make the point.
Yeah, he says his temptation isn't the stuff you'd expect, like cocaine or hookers.
Yeah, it's the internal sin of pride. To become puffed up and self-righteous and be filled with hubris and arrogance. He says that's the real threat, especially for successful men.
And this connects to a really unusual rule he has at work.
the no compliments rule.
Right. No compliments in the office.
Right.
He thinks flattery is, and I'm quoting, far more insidious and dangerous to the human soul than attacks.
Because when you perform, when you're on TV or running a business, you get constant affirmation.
And he says that positive feedback, if you don't check it, will destroy your soul.
So it's a recognition of his own vulnerability to that specific sin, to hubris. He needs honest critics, not people who just tell him he's great.
So you establish that internal discipline first, you fight the hubris, but then once that's in place, he turns his focus outward.
And it is a sharp turn. He jumps from self-righteousness to these massive societal threats.
And for him, the real threat isn't just, the other political party. It's platforms that he believes enable vice and destroy relationships.
He specifically calls out OnlyFans and Tinder as threats to the civilization.
He's especially forceful about pornography, says it should be banned immediately, and the people who put it online should be jailed.
But then he makes this other, far more controversial claim. He doesn't just say it's immoral.
No, he asserts that, quote, all the porn sites are controlled by governments and intel agencies.
And that nothing you go to on a porn site is all being stored and will be used against you.
Which is a huge claim, connecting personal vice directly to state surveillance.
It is. But let's follow his logic for how this connects to his idea of civilization. For him, the deepest instinct of a man and the way society is built is around protecting his wife and children.
It's all structured to ensure paternity.
Exactly. So if that's the foundation of society, then anything that subverts the man's role as protector is an attack on civilization itself.
And he makes this really crucial distinction. He says, okay, general adultery is bad, obviously, but there's a way darker subversion.
And that specific scenario is when a wife sleeps with some random guy stranger and husband approves.
He believes modern culture encourages that, and that it emasculates a man on the deepest possible level.
Which brings us right back to OnlyFans. He calls it by far the biggest prostitution ring in the country.
And he tells this anecdote about women he met at Bible studies in L.A.
Right, who he says were lured onto the platform because of the pressure to keep up a certain celebrity lifestyle.
Started with, innocent photos and then got pulled deeper and deeper. He described them as broken, lost, and confused.
And he draws a straight line from that kind of disordered personal life to a lack of integrity at work.
He's very explicit about it. Says he vets employees on this. That a freaky personal life absolutely affects your integrity and makes straightforward, honest behavior impossible. The two are linked.
Okay, so from that foundation of personal integrity,
or lack thereof.
Right. We can now transition to his critique of the broader political world, which he sees through that same lens of integrity and faith.
And his positioning is interesting. He's very critical of both parties. He calls the political divide completely false.
Yeah, he says he won't vote Democrat because of abortion, but in the same breath says Republicans are, by and large, repulsive to me.
So he sees both sides as failing to uphold the values he's talking about.
And that nonpartisan view is really the setup for his deepest critiques. He moves from that general disgust into questioning these fundamental alliances.
Specifically, the debate within Christianity about supporting the modern state of Israel.
He really kicked up a storm with this. It started with him questioning the theological definition of who is Israel in the Bible.
Suggesting it's a spiritual identity, not just an ethnic or governmental one.
Then he directly critiques the Israeli government's actions in Gaza, which the source material quotes him describing as a historic crime and a genocide. He says those actions are inconsistent with Christianity.
And his critique then gets even more specific. He targets certain Christian pastors and political figures.
Yes. He claims that some are basically acting as political actors, saying they get paid and take free trips from the Israeli government to get propaganda points.
And then use the Bible to justify what he sees as violence.
And the really provocative detail he adds is that he says none of these pastors who so fiercely defend Israel's policies ever actually go and try to, evangelize in Tel Aviv.
This is preaching.
Right. They never try to convert Israelis. And he says when he brought this up, when he questioned the theology, he was just attacked.
Called an anti-Semite.
Which, to him, was the tell. He says that's what people do when they can't defend their position. They just attack you.
And this whole analysis of political integrity, it brings him to his conclusion about why Christianity is declining in America.
Right. When asked who's to blame, he says the threat isn't other religions, It's not Muslims. It's not Orthodox Jews.
It's secular people, the people without God.
And he points to history for that, citing the massive genocides under atheist regimes like in the Soviet Union or Mao's China. He says that's what happens when men believe that they are God.
Okay, so we've covered the diagnosis of societal failure. Let's pivot back to the solution, the smallest unit of society, the family.
Yes, he offers some very, very practical advice here based on his own 41-year marriage.
This is where his ideas about order meet the real world.
And he says the single most critical thing for a successful marriage is respect.
He argues men are commanded to love their wives, but women are commanded to respect their husbands.
And that respect is what gives the husband strength. And maybe more importantly, it's what gives the children a sense of peace and security.
He also points out what he sees as a huge mistake couples make.
Focusing too much on the kids.
Right. On their immediate needs. He says couples use their children as an escape from your spouse. The marriage has to be the priority.
And part of that priority is the husband being the leader of the house.
He's careful to say that doesn't mean being a boss or an autocrat.
No, it just means taking responsibility for decisions. He says if a husband avoids that, his wife will eventually hate you for that because she feels adrift.
And that responsibility leads to this piece of very famous advice from the interview. We're calling it the pink napkin rule.
Ah, yes. The pink napkin rule. It's a little mechanism for showing engagement.
So the rule is simple. Your wife asks for your input on a small decision, let's say wedding napkin colors, or where to go for dinner.
The husband's job is to state a specific choice immediately. Pink napkins, or let's go to the Italian place.
Then, when she almost inevitably pushes back with her actual preference.
Oh, I was actually thinking orange. Or what about Chinese?
His job is to immediately and enthusiastically agree. That's absolutely right. Orange is much better. We're going for Chinese.
And the psychological insight here is, well, it's pretty profound.
It really is.
Because when a husband just defaults by saying, I trust you, you got this, or the classic, whatever you want.
Yeah, we've all heard that one.
The way she hears that, according to him, is not, he trusts me, it's, he doesn't care.
He doesn't care enough to even engage with the question.
Exactly. That's the core of it. She wants him to be present, to make a choice, even if she's the one who ultimately steers the final decision. He claims following that rule saves so much sadness and drama.
So we've gone from a spiritual awakening, driven by seeing destruction in the world, all the way down to a communication tactic for choosing a restaurant.
But the thread is consistent. External failure begins with internal indiscipline.
The takeaways from this worldview seem pretty clear. You have to fight the log in your own eye first. The hubris, the self-righteousness.
And you have to maintain this relentless personal and professional integrity. The way you conduct your private life is, for him, directly linked to your ability to act honestly in public.
And the source material leaves us with one final and very provocative thought. It's about technology.
Yes. He expresses real alarm about our growing reliance on AI. Specifically things like ChatGPT or Bible apps replacing your own personal research.
He argues that if you outsource that kind of critical thinking, that personal exploration of faith, you will inevitably end up worshiping false gods.
So we've seen his argument for how tech platforms can subvert personal integrity and the family. The question for you, the listener, is this. How does our increasing reliance on artificial intelligence subvert our own intellectual and spiritual integrity?
And what kind of specific personal discipline is required now to maintain a faith and a worldview that is truly your own?
Something to think about.
Until next time.
See you on the next Deep Dive.